back, listeners, to the Mindful Living podcast, where we unpack the ways presence and self awareness can transform our inner and outer lives. I'm your host, Sana, and today's conversation feels especially relevant to anyone who has ever had life throw them off course. Now, listeners, we are diving into how mindful awareness during life's disruptions, especially those that shake our very identity, can be the key to personal growth. And with me is David Aferiat. He is a dual American French citizen and owner of Avid Wines, an organic wine importer based in Atlanta. Now, listeners, let me share a bit about David with all of you. His life story, bridging cultures, reconnecting with family after decades, and weaving tradition with innovation. To me, it offers a perfect lens through which we can explore resilience, emotional well being, and also redefining identity with intention. So, let's get real about what it takes to move from resistance to resilience when life doesn't go as planned. So, David, welcome to the show, and I'm really, really honored to have you here with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you very, very much for providing this stage and allowing me the chance to connect with you and your audience.
Absolutely, absolutely. David, so to begin with, let's talk about identity disruptions. I mean, they can be personal, they can be professional, sometimes they can be cultural as well. And they sometimes can really, really feel kind of, destabilizing. Really, kind of the entire, our world is like shaken. So, in your own journey, have there been any moments where you felt like you had to completely redefine who you were?
Yes, I think it happens to a lot of people,
Mhm.
in various aspects of their lives. And certainly when it impacts your career, it can be because it touches your financial well being. It can be quite, as you mentioned, it can be to the core kind of shock to the system.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. I agree. And when you were going through these moments, um, what helped you avoid clinging to an outdated version of yourself? Because it's kind of natural for us that our brains our brain tries to resist change. Our brain kind of protects us from sudden changes, whether it's for good or bad. And then we kind of somehow get into our old ways. That's natural. That can happen. So, what you had to do to avoid that?
Yes, great question. Well, I'm going to expound on what you just mentioned before. I mean, we do have the old ways, and you can call them old ways, habits, and routines
Mhm.
because they are meant to make us efficient. A old routine works until it doesn't, and some you have to work to create and curate new routines.
Mhm.
This, for
Mhm.
example, this could be a health crisis where you're confronted with a particular you know, issue related to either your heart or the onset of diabetes, and it forces you to say, my routine, whatever it was before for my wellness, has got to change, and it can be hard work. It could be an overindulgence, an addiction to alcohol or anything else, and when it affects another aspect of your life and it's no longer in moderation, then you have to change your routine. Um, and so that's on a level of, I don't want to call it surface. Those are pretty, those can be fundamental to the core kinds of changes. But
Mhm.
when becomes part of what we need to do in terms of our mental health, well, sometimes we are the product of routines that are unconscious, old habits, as you mentioned.
Mhm.
They get formed out of trauma in order to protect us
Yeah.
and give us a sense of fight or flight. Well, here's the direction you need to go in. And these are triggering moments meant to protect us when we have the first instance of the trauma. And then anytime anything in life comes close to this radar system or that trips a wire, so to speak. And
Mhm.
it can continue to serve us if we do, in fact, walk into a certain kind of dangerous situation, but it can also be outdated. And then you have to figure out why am I falling into a routine that doesn't serve me anymore? And I have found through others on my own journey, techniques and in particular, a couple of books and a couple of individuals who have helped me to deprogram what is called like the undermind, our subconscious that's running not a useful routine anymore. And there are techniques for literally turning that routine into smoke and just freeing it and letting it go. I can give an example about how all this was real in my life when I worked and started a company 20 years ago with two other partners. That was a FinTech software company, and it was a subscription as a service model. And the premise of the company was to help our subscribers make better decisions in the stock market, in the US stock market in particular. So think of alerts and filters and indicators all put together and designed in a way to show those who would trade on the stock market short term strategies and indicators to help them make a buy and sell decision. Um, and so we grew this company for 20 years. We were on the Inc. 5000 list for 6 years in a row. And we had all the cycles of booming business. And there were other cycles where we took our hands off the wheel and starting families, and we saw competitors kind of come in and so forth. And it was highly rewarding until and when it wasn't, I path the company was on was not the one that I wanted to be on or continue. Just the end game was not something I signed up for. And so
Okay.
I turned over the day-to-day operations to the existing leadership team and the remaining partner that was there and
Mhm.
continue on as an investor, so that I can pursue what I want to spend my time and passion, focused on. Part of that is, as you explained, this beautiful import company that brings in from Champagne, France, to the US for the top 1% of those who really enjoy champagne, um, certified organic, sustainable champagne. But I've had the space and capacity to also create a coaching practice, a growth coach practice for CEOs and owners and their leadership teams um, that are at the 10 million mark in annual revenue or above and are facing challenges on the path of scaling and growing that I bring a methodology and tool set that helps them turn obstacles into opportunities and or just simplify and prioritize so that they can execute and communicate more effectively. So, um, what I just described, I mean, I glossed over this transition of
Mhm.
my fintech company and into this new, into these new endeavors, and I would not have been able to do it had I clung to some old traumas that were happening that told me that I needed to move on from this, fintech company into a totally uncertain territory before I
Mhm.
found, my particular passions here and found the next chapters. It was a bit of being in the wilderness that for many, some people stay in, and I could see myself staying in and just being not fulfilled or happy. Um, but the question then became like, how did I walk out of that wilderness toward more purpose?
Mm. It seems back like you went to explore your roots, your origin, your culture, definitely. And are you still an investor in that fintech company, or did you definitely made a successful exit in there?
No, I'm still an investor in the company. So, and so wish them well in getting where it needs to go. But it, like I said, I put more of my focus and attention on these new chapters. And um, just a little bit more about that, I use a framework that's I refer to as a hero's journey, right? And it's very easy. It's the basis of almost every film you've ever seen, from like The Wizard of Oz to Star Wars to, and it's often used in marketing, and it's a common storytelling narrative, right? That the hero has a call to adventure, and
Right.
sometimes reluctantly has to take this call, to adventure, but starts the path, fails a bit or wanders, finds a mentor, a guide, and then you know, with that help, is able to confront the challenges along the path. Some kind of uh, challenge then ensues, and there's a resolution one way or another. And so, when Luke Skywalker meets Obi-Wan Kenobi, or when Rey meets Luke Skywalker, and in the more recent versions of Star Wars, you kind of understand that I had a call to adventure that I really didn't want. I didn't want this realization that, this partnership needed to, the direction of the company needed to change, and my, my my place, and my place in the company in its new direction that I didn't like or didn't support wasn't going to keep me, happy. And so, um, you, I had to. It was I should say, it was kind of like a shock to my identity. How do you, lots of ways we define our identity, and for many, most of them is what I wake up and do for 8 or 10 hours, a day, and
Yeah.
I found that to be quite brittle. And I came to the realization, thanks to some of the both the tribe that I belong to of peer business owners and
Mhm.
several key people on my journey. I came to the realization that we're better served in life if we anchor our identity not in the roles that we play, but in the values that we want to live by. And so
Mm.
I had to, and discovering what your values that you want to live by is not, it's not meant to be a creative exercise. Like, gee, what do I want to do? You simply have to look back at your life and look at the footsteps and see, when I made certain decisions, what were my actions revealing? And then it
Right.
becomes kind of simple to, to articulate. I shouldn't say simple. It takes some very, profound meditation and reflection on what do these actions say about me? When I do certain things, what does this reveal about me? And so that exercise, um, helped me, thanks to a retreat that I actually attended by an amazing mentor of mine who, is a retired colonel in the Air Force and the first
Mm.
female fighter pilot. Her name is Martha McSally. Um, I went on a retreat, with it was a kind of a leadership retreat, that she had organized, and it just came to the realization of, these are how I show up in the world. I show up as a lifelong learner. My actions have always been constantly upgrading models and learning. The second value I have is an outward mindset, which is, how do I, even in an organization and outside, serve out of a mindset of abundance instead of scarcity?
Mm.
And, I've often been in sales. And so, like, how can sales serve marketing, which then in turn helps marketing serve sales? If organizations and those who do certain functional jobs within a company can see themselves not as, well, I'm just throwing this over the cubicle wall to somebody, but how do I think of what my output is
Mhm.
as it's someone else's input? And so how do I make that, if I understand what their needs are, how can I make my output and their input even better and serve that? Lifelong learning, outward mindset, and showing up avid. Avid is a very powerful word for me. And so, it is a reminder for me about showing up fully present, um,
Yeah.
and being in the present, not anxious for the future, not regretful of the past, but showing up as present as I can in this moment. And again, it's taken a lot of, and I can mention some of these, but, you know, guides that have been on my path, right, for my hero's journey.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. And one thing that really kind of is connecting with mindfulness, that we often talk about the tools and all the practices, meditation, breath work, anything that helps us embrace mindfulness. But I think sometimes through um, introspections, analysis like this, that what kind of factors I'm considering whenever I'm taking any critical decisions. How am I reacting? How am I behaving? What I'm thinking? I think these kind of reflections and introspections, they also help us a lot in becoming self-aware about the present as well. So, yeah, I think that's a more accessible and more practical way of looking at mindfulness.
I can expound on that. I mean, I had a great mentor and continues to be a great mentor to me, um, who is a Buddhist, former Buddhist monk. His name is Don Depani, Dandeepeani, Don Depani. And one of his mantras is energy flows where attention goes. And so if your attention is arrested by a trigger or an element that gives you induces anxiety, instant anxiety or instant anger,
Mhm.
then control of your breath and a mindfulness that is staying present is able to say, "Whoa, that just had an uptick in my heartbeat, and whoa, I'm feeling, certain sensations." And if I can gently move my attention from an area of anger, where then if my next action were taken out of anger, it probably wouldn't be ideal, or out of anxiety. How can I move my attention gently and awareness? And he looks at it like the room is dark, and where the spotlight, glows is it's glowing on a particular emotion. So anger is being in the spotlight, like gently over to stage left here and come to another place that is right. So gratitude is often a go here first and then move someplace, more strategic or more, optimistic. But gratitude can often be a whoa, okay, this is how I slow the moment down and
Mm.
and think through that. And so that I've used that many a time to help with my breathing and my family's as well.
Mm. Wow, that's a beautiful way to look at it, David. And talking about, of course, I couldn't leave this out in our conversation. So you have lived two different cultures. I mean, lived between American and French for much of your life. So how has that shaped your sense of identity and belonging?
Um, that's a great question. In in some ways, it's advantageous, right? So if you ever wanted to like be motivated, you've got two languages in which great thought leaders are and do express their motivations,
Right, right.
or love, or romance, or pick anything, and you just have double. You have double the especially with France, but certainly in Indian culture as well, and so many different cultures. You just get the best thinking from beyond just the language of your maternal language. Um,
Mm.
Something you said in that and the way you phrased the question is has me also thinking of this other thought about this is a strong identity question too, right? And it sometimes is the case where I sit neither in either camp. For instance, if I'm if uh, you know when I'm in America and I speak French, every other I'm often like, oh my gosh, French sounds amazing, or it's great. I'm someone who comes across as very fluent in French. When I'm in France and I'm speaking, French, I have a very small. I try to minimize it, as best as I can. I come across not as French. I come across as very foreign, um, just
Okay.
beyond just the language. Just either my instant grasp of the zeitgeist and the instant cultural touchstone references and such that I might be a week or a month behind, in kind of absorbing, can affect some conversations, especially if I'm trying to convey humor. So it's just interesting. Sometimes I find myself in no man's land between, somewhere over the Atlantic. It's neither French nor is it American. It's, uh, you know, and you just have to be somewhat open to that, those times where you kind of live in a neither um, territory.
And that gives you a very neutral perspective to it.
Hmm.
Oh, okay, great. And it's kind of I see it as a duality. And it's interesting because some people see duality as a strength, while others might see it as a constant, negotiation, kind of coming from a place of frustration or um, anger or helplessness. But I think what you said, what you described, it really kind of highlights more as a strength. So that's kind of creative way to look at it. And
I think you have to. I mean, why wouldn't learn? This it feeds my lifelong learning value. I mean, my children speak the language now, and it's very actually difficult when the parental language is the one that actually gets passed on. It's usually the maternal one. So if you are the father, you have to do more than double time. It has to be an all-consuming endeavor, and I'm proud to say that both of my daughters are fluent, and it brings me an enormous amount of pride to be able to know that, it's okay, it's in there. It's with them, and they're gonna be able to read a room and decide which, which territory are they or which identity are they going to be using in this room? Are they gonna be the American that speaks really good French, or are they gonna be the French person who has an American accent and use it to their charm?
yeah.
Uh, use it their decisions and their, calculus to make. Um,
Dudes. Yeah. Yeah. That's also a really good point. That's a really good point. Great. And also, before we wrap up, I'll just put a bit of a nuanced perspective here. Now, talking about once again life disruptions, David. Some would argue that let's not overcomplicate life by even talking more and more about these disruptions, or like just trying to see them from a point of transformation. Let's just uh, embrace them, go by the flow, and not dig so deep. So, what's your thought on this approach?
so said another way, you're saying, what's my take on
Not overcomplicating life disruptions by trying to make them transformational.
I don't know how to answer that except to say that what helped me, I've already kind of indicated, like I had a plan and a journey for my daughters so that they could learn the language, become fluent, and dive into and tap into the rich cultural heritage that is what I bring to the table in their French heritage. Um, I've done that for myself too. Like, how do I look at myself 10 years from now and say, how can I live a life where I drop the keys off to this future version of myself and, say, hey, I did my job. Everything's good, good health, good everything, good, wellness, finance, and family and so forth. Now you have the keys and you take it another, 10 years on this relay race that is life. Um, and I've always been very focused on that. And so the way that you get to a future version of yourself is to invest in what are your daily routines in the present and how do you curate them and to create habits. You could read Atomic Habits by James Hand and learn the value of having these curated routines for your wellness, like we talked before about even on the onset of diabetes, what that means, or other kind of, or just staying healthy with a vision that I saw my mother have with my kids and her grandchildren, which was at her age, being able to be on the floor, be flexible enough in the knees and legs and so forth to be on the floor with her grandkids to play. And I was like, wow, that's a great image rather than the other one of like stooped over at the hips, bent over and like net wagging a finger, like come back here and oh, let me, hand that to me or what. No, just to be on the floor with a grandchild is to say, I'm on the same level with you. Let's play. It's pretty powerful. So if you're going to curate that, if you have that as a vision for yourself, you curate it by saying, well, what's a daily routine I can do to get to that vision? Take up yoga, do some core, do Pilates, stretch, and put that as your weekly routine, and you will be well on your way of handing off the keys to a future version of yourself. So that's what I've been focused on. And when I went through this particular trauma or transition in my identity that evoked some previous traumas, it was for the first time that I actually had to look back to a earlier version of myself. And I was only able to do this thanks to an amazing book and an amazing friend of mine, another mentor, also, well, whose name is Tanya Chernova, Chernova, Chernova. And her book, The Undermined, is an excellent, almost handbook for revisiting past traumas and turning the routines that instantly get cemented into our brains as protective routines, how to decode and or turn them into smoke um, in a very effective way so that they don't keep running or go on autopilot and derail you where it doesn't serve you anymore. And so there's the nuts and bolts of the book. There's goes into much more detail, but it required for me to go and revisit a past and earlier version of myself, a younger version, and say, even in my childhood, around a trauma related to when things get taken away. Um, and I had to revisit that trauma and that early version and say, hey, you know what? Early version of David, um, I understand why you created this routine. And, it served you well when it happened. But I'm here to tell you in this way, way future version that things turn out, not only do they turn out pretty good, but you are in store, my friend, for some amazing experiences. And I'm here to tell you that you don't need to run this routine now. Let's put it to bed. And so, you say that through meditation and words of affirmation and love. Like, hey, I love you. You did great, and you're going to turn out great. Now let's kind of join hips here and kind of turn and face this future version of ourselves that we want to walk towards because you did a great job getting us going. I've done a great job getting us here. And now we're both going to walk, kind of hand in hand here into the future. And it is, a powerful, and the book explains it much more. It is a value driven and very heartfelt way of forgiving yourself and just nudging the kind of routines that nudging out of the routine and into being obsolete, these these routines that just don't work for you anymore.
Mm. I think it's kind of, I think it also comes from a point of self compassion and sometimes, forgiving yourself as well.
Oh, sure.
Because that's kind of a sense of gratitude that you are expressing to your younger version or your older version, that even if you faced this problem or you went through a traumatic experience, but you came out of it and now you are in a good place. Uh, yeah, I think and that's a very, very uh, very healthy practice to do. And especially if you're meditating or you're just kind of sitting in stillness, not the literal stillness, like the silence, but at least you're kind of still within yourself and you're trying to do some reflections. So, yeah, that's a good way.
Thank you.
Great, great. So, David, before we wrap up, if our listeners they would like to connect with you and extract more wisdom from you and would also like to share their thoughts, what would be the best way?
Sure. So, I think the best way there's 2 websites. You can come and visit us where we're, um, having a great time with our organic champagne, and that's Avid Vines, one word, Avid, AVID, Vines, VINES.com. And, if you are, an executive, part of the leadership team or the owner of the business that's struggling with growth and scale, but want to and have a growth mindset, then please visit me at Avid. There's that word again, avid.coach. And avid.coach will put you in contact with what I do with transforming, being a guide for those businesses and heroes that are leading, uh, that want to lead change and lead their own businesses to higher ground.
Hmm. I'll make sure to have all the links in the show notes. And David, this was such a candid conversation. Um, yeah, definitely. Because I think more than the do's and the don'ts and the hows and what, it's more about the lived experiences, um, the mentors that you have had, and the experiences that you have had, and the insights from those experiences. I think they definitely shape our identity, and it isn't fixed. It's something we can consciously shape, especially in those moments that feel like we are losing our footing. So
Right.
thank you.
Well, you made this very enjoyable and easy, and the conversation flowed thanks to you, Sana. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, David, for your encouraging words. And to all the listeners out there, I'm very sure you're walking away with both the permission to sit with discomfort and an inspiration to see the potential for growth in it. So, until next time, this is your host, Sana, and this has been the Mindful Living Podcast. Be kind to yourself and notice the small ways you can return to presence. You can return to yourself, your values, even in life's most toughest situations. Thank you.